Welcome to Backyard Cigars. Today I'm smoking a stogie. But first I want to welcome you to the final chapter, at least that I believe, of the American Pride and Puro series. Now, there was supposed to be a part 7, but we're going to have to settle for a part 6 because Guillermo Rico and George Rico of Gran Habano never responded to my email and sent me the Gran Habano American Puro, which would have been the 7th installment in this series. So we're going to stick with finishing it up at part 6 with a John Hay cigar. Now this is an American Puro, although it is rolled in the Dominican Republic. It's rolled in the Dominican Republic, but it is made entirely of American tobacco. How so? Well, PA, this is Pennsylvania Broadleaf tobacco. The wrapper, the binder, and the filler are all Pennsylvania Broadleaf. And this is how they make these cigars nowadays. Now, this is a company that goes back to the 1800s, to the late 1800s. Their popularity soaring during the early 19th century and sort of curtailing around the 1940s, mid 1940s, when you started to see a progression in machine-made cigars. Now, originally, these cigars were made with a Havana filler. Well, circle back a little bit. First, it was all broadleaf. And then, once their popularity increased, sometime in the 1920s or the early 1930s, they switched to the Havana filler. Then, in I believe the late 40s or possibly the early 50s, they switched over to machine-made cigars, but I do believe that they still employed the Pennsylvania Broadleaf wrapper and binder. What they used as a filler, I'm not exactly sure, but it may have been a mixture of some Central American and South American tobaccos. Not really sure about that, but I will look into that. Now this is the John Hay PA Maduro Cadet, and it's one of their traditional sizes. In 1917, this was a 10-cent cigar, and they did a lot of Christmas promotion. That was one of their things. They just had to roll out some specials during the Christmas time. And one of the specials that they rolled out during the Christmas of 1932 was when they were informing the consumer that they were discontinuing the previous. You could actually turn them in, trade them in, and pay the difference for the new Havana filler. This is a 5x49 Perfecto. And it's starting off like I know Pennsylvania Broadleaf to be. Kind of rough around the edges, kind of leathery. Got that bad taste in the back of my mouth. What can I say? Well, look, this isn't long filler in these cigars. This is medium cut. I spoke with one of the owners, and he was very gracious. He said, look, we're just making a working man cigar, but we've improved the quality. And, obviously, this is not going to harken back to the days of rare Havana filler, but we feel confident that we're putting out a good product, and they're cheap. They're cheap. I mean, these cigars are about, they're under $3 a piece. So you can buy many of these cigars and won't be busting any banks. Now I'm going to be reading something in the style of the movie um, with Tom Hanks, News of the World. I believe that's the name of the movie. But this is an article from the St. Petersburg Times, October 18th, 1942. And it says, so the tobacco leaf roll was called a cigar. It was puffed for a few centuries in Cuba and Spain, and then bingo. It was introduced into the U.S. about 1762 by General Israel Putnam. By 1810, homemade versions of the imported variety were being made in Connecticut. About 1785, though, Tobies or Stogies were also being made by the Pennsylvania Dutch. These were horrible black contrivances, supposedly named after the Conestoga or covered wagon, and according to reports, they also tasted like a Conestoga wagon. They sold for about a penny a piece. It's kind of harsh. It's kind of harsh. But that was more than likely the reality. That these working man cigars were not very tasty. And at that point, the Pennsylvania Broadleaf and the growth of the Pennsylvania Broadleaf just wasn't there to give them that type of quality. Competing with, whether it be Indonesian leaf or Cuban leaf, or for that matter, leaf from Connecticut, was a different thing for them. They couldn't compete with those big boys. Not that the Connecticut boys were that big at that time either. It's just how things were. There wasn't a lot of variety. There wasn't a lot of high quality tobacco. Now, the movie's name was News of the World, and the only reason I mentioned it was because I had these. But it turns out I didn't need them. Nope. Glasses were sufficient. That article was actually called Inside Story on Cigars, and like I said, it was from 1942, and it painted the picture that these Pennsylvania Broadleaf tobacco cigars were not very good. But things changed over time, and one of the things that I found in the Miamisburg Bulletin, June 28th, 1889, and this is from an article in the New York Tobacco Leaf. Cigar leaf. The export demand still continues, and large blocks of tobacco that were this week sold for that purpose. Pennsylvania Broadleaf of the 1888 crop still continues to be the favorite tobacco on the other side of the ocean. Tobaccos from other states were also sold for export, but the accounts were not of large dimensions. Not much is being done in home trade tobacco, and perhaps a number of weeks will roll by before a brisk trade can be reported. The prospects are excellent for a profitable business for packers of domestic leaf, as the new Sumatra crop will come extremely high and is by no means a very fine tobacco. Consequently, fine domestic wrappers will no doubt sell to the advantage of both buyer and seller. So what does that tell you right there? Well, first of all, it's entwined with a little dig, or not maybe so little dig, at Sumatra, because there was this raging battle, right, that I've talked about throughout the whole American Pride and PURO series about the Sumatra leaf, about how it wasn't allowing the Florida leaf to expand, about how it was shutting down business ventures in Wisconsin, in Georgia, and how it wasn't allowing the domestic leaf to get a hold, a foot inside the market for tobacco. And we're not just talking about wrappers here, we're just talking about binders and fillers, everything. So there was this way of doing things that cigar makers were accustomed to, and there was this need for a good 5 cent, and at this point, by 1913, a good 10-cent cigar that just wasn't being met. There was a need for it and it wasn't being met. And everyone from politicians to cigar lovers and cigar makers across the board were finding a way to get it done. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy convincing one half of the market to follow the other half. It just wasn't. You had a lot of people that were in favor of it, would like to see it, but it didn't make sense, not on paper, not financially. So things needed to happen in order for this to occur. And you'd get these digs. These digs were for if you owned a tobacco shop, if you were a tobacconist and you were reading this, this was good news for you. I don't have to rely on the Sumatra leaf, but even if I do, I'm going to pay extra for it. Yeah, I know it'll sell, but the stock is rising on this Pennsylvania stuff. What do? Maybe I buy some of this. Get out on the ground floor. So, this is from an article in 1932, and it's actually more of an advertisement. And you can see here, John Hay Cigars. And it reads, well, it's cut off at the top, but it's at the top it says, Havana, only the best can be procured is used to make the famous John Hay cigars. That's why it is popular and smoked exclusively by thousands of smokers. There's a reason, a mild and moderate smoke that will satisfy. Ask for John Hay at the next cigar counter, made in 4 sizes and sold at popular prices. This is from 1932. Was it 32? I'll verify that, but I believe it's 1932. And you know, that's the last of the readings that I have for you today, because now I'm just going to tell you what I'm tasting. Is it good or is it not good? Okay, let's get to business. Told you it was leathery from the start, and it was rough around the edges. It had just like this dirt, just like dirt and leather combined. You notice I'm not even calling it earth, right? But I'm not meaning to insult the cigar. It's just, when I think of earth, I'm thinking of that fine soil that you find tobacco growing in, or other plants and flowers. And when I think of dirt, I think of that stuff that you don't want to grow anything in, that you've got to nourish before you can actually think about growing something in it. And it feels different and it smells different. Not necessarily bad, but different. And that's what I'm getting here. There's this leathery bitterness. Look, it is what it is. It's $2.75 cigar. Construction is decent. It's rustic as heck, but kind of expected that. Expect that in the broadleafs, whether they're from Pennsylvania or Connecticut. A little bit of pepper coming in. A better earth note was just produced. So something that tasted a little more closer to that earth that I like. Yeah, is this like peppery earth with leather bitterness. That's what we got so far. I'm going to come back. I'm going to sum it all up. Okay, I'll tell you what this cigar is. It is still very much a working man cigar. If I owned a Conestoga wagon, I would be smoking this on the road because I wouldn't want to smoke, even if I could afford better smokes, those types of cigars as I'm on my travels. I'd want something akin to what we consider a yard gar, boat cigar, something that is cheap, decent, and that we don't have to think about too much if it falls in the water or if it goes out and we have to turn it on again. It's got all those classic Pennsylvania Broadleaf flavors, but it lacks the refinement of top-notch quality tobacco. It's just the way it is. I'll call it like I see it. Because, number one, just because it's not long filler doesn't mean that automatically it's bad. It's not the case. But in this case, we do know that it's medium cut, so it's not necessarily short filler. It's somewhere in the middle. And we also know that it's not intended to be this super premium boutique cigar. This is something that is supposed to take you back into time. This is something that is supposed to remind you of what things were like. A 10-cent cigar. Only now you pay $2.75 for it, plus shipping. It's not the worst cigar that I've had. John Hay Cigars and that company, I actually had to call them on the phone and place my order on the phone because the website wasn't working. So they're challenged by technology as well, which kind of goes in line with everything that they're doing here. Doesn't surprise me one bit, but the delivery was fast. I got to tell you that. I got it in 3 days. And they're good people, and they have the history. They're in Pennsylvania. Originally, back in the late 1800s, they were out in Reading, Pennsylvania, by W.W. Stewart and Sons. And I think that relatives of the family have taken over. It's hitting a stride right about now, but it's a little less bitter, a little earthier, light pepper, and just dirt. But I've had worse. I've had much worse. And I got to tell you this, the construction's held up. It's an ugly little cigar with a very antique-y looking band, but the construction has held up. This was rolled properly. Can't expect anything less from being rolled in the Dominican Republic, right? They're going to roll it right. And it's an American puro. It's a piece of history. And while not shining as brightly in terms of the overall smoking experience or tobacco quality as my previous American puros, it still says something about the determination of keeping a legacy going, keeping tradition going, and just continuing to go forward as best as you can. Maybe they don't have the funds to acquire the best Pennsylvania Broadleaf that they can find. Their operation's small. They've got to work small. But I encourage them to keep at it, keep doing what they're doing, and eventually we'll find something on another level from them, hopefully. But I'm just glad to be enjoying a piece of history right now because I really can't imagine this back in 1889, sitting back with one of those hats on a wagon, traveling across the country, and with a box of these in the back of the wagon, and just hoping for a better future, for a better tomorrow, hoping for the best, for the grand old American dream, for the USA, which I love so much. So thank you for watching. Till next time, Backyard Cigars.